of a shapeshifter throughout her entire career and existence. I would call her in some ways a survivor. She's had a number of different environments, sort of growing up in Oakland to two university professors as a small kid. And then after divorce, her mom took her and her sister Maya to Canada, where she went to high school and then started college there. Yeah. And then she, came as almost an adult to the United States and went to Howard University and sort of immersed herself in that culture of the predominantly Black college. And then she came to San Francisco, where she went to Hastings in the Tenderloin area of San Francisco. So educationally, she's kind of traveled all over the United States.
But she spent her high school years in Canada.
Yeah, she spent her high school years in Canada and, not in San Francisco. And so I think one of the interesting things that I found when looking at her background is the first time she registered to vote was at age 29. So
really?
Yeah. So many years after coming to the United States and during the year that she dated our former mayor and speaker, Willie Brown, is the year that she registered to vote. And so connecting the dots, it seems like that might be the time when she decided that politics is in her future because, she began to create a voting record and setting down roots at that time. But she hadn't registered to vote
before she was
There's
almost
no
30.
record of her having registered to vote until she was almost 30, which is, I have nieces and nephews and I urge them to get educated and register to vote and get active. And so, it's kind of an important thing. So well after she became an attorney, well after she became a prosecutor, she hadn't registered to vote.
Well, that's interesting. 11 years after she was eligible.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
And that's interesting, not because everyone has to vote, in my opinion, but because she's described herself repeatedly in public as a child activist.
Yeah.
She was basically leading the March on Washington. She single-handedly desegregated the American South.
Right.
She was always into politics.
She was a warrior for freedom. Early on. And
there wasn't, just for the record, there was no segregation.
I mean,
country.
Her mom was interviewed many years ago before she passed away and tells a story about how where they were growing up in Montreal in the apartment complex where they lived, apparently children weren't allowed to play outside. So Kamala Harris single-handedly protested this and organized and forced the apartment building to allow children to be able to play outdoors. So
she was annoying as a child.
She was a activist as a child, according to her mom, but then didn't exercise the most basic form of United States citizen activism by exercising the franchise until much later in life. And
after she was a lawyer, how did she become a lawyer?
Well, she became a lawyer, went to UC Hastings in downtown San Francisco, did not pass the bar the first time she took it, did pass it the second time around, and got her first job after that as a prosecutor in Alameda County. So in Alameda County, she eventually specialized in child sex crimes, an important job. And according to research that was done by some of her opposition when she ran for district attorney in 2003, she tried something like 8 cases that they can prove there during her 8 years or so as a prosecutor in Alameda County.
So I lack perspective on this. Is that a lot? A little?
It's very little.
Very little.
For somebody who's claimed today in all of her public appearances to have been a lifelong law enforcement officer and prosecutor, and when she ran for district attorney, claimed to have tried hundreds of cases. She actually, according to what I've been able to dig up and what her opposition dug up on her in 2003, which she never refuted, 2 cases in San Francisco during the 2 years that she worked at the DA's office before quitting and then planning her run against her boss, 8 in the Alameda County District Attorney's office. So she basically held those 2 jobs as a prosecutor. Now, Terrence Hallinan, let's setting the stage of my meeting her in San Francisco. So San Francisco had a very progressive prosecutor. I think he was elected in 1996 or so, named Terrence Hallinan.
Famous person in California.
Famous guy. He was one of some brothers. My departed husband served on the board of the Liberal Pacifica radio station with one of the other Hallinan brothers. So, they were kind of regulars in the left-wing activist circles in San Francisco. And Hallinan promised to be a progressive prosecutor, and he came on board and was a progressive prosecutor, would serve soup at the soup kitchens and things like that. Kind of old school liberal. And that said, he was tough on murders and tough on the serious crimes, but it was the lower level drug dealers and so forth, that quality of life crimes that he was a little bit softer on. But he recruited Kamala Harris, or hired her anyway, and she hired her out of the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. And during that campaign in 2003, he actually said that he did it as a favor to the mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. But there's a mixed record on that. But he gave her chance to move from the job she was in, which was sort of, Alameda County is not San Francisco. San Francisco's the big leagues where all the glamorous stuff happens in the Bay Area, and where we had 2 United States senators from there. A lot of the top brass in California that's now infecting the United States came from San Francisco County. So she was a step up to go to be a prosecutor in the big city there in San Francisco. So she got her opportunity to move over there. And she was the head of the criminal organization's 5-person unit after being there for a bit of time. And so, it was 5 people she was in charge of, but she was passed over for chief of staff, which is the number 2 position in the district attorney's office, on 2 occasions. And, as soon as she got there, she began making her mark and setting her eyes on her political career. Okay. So starting around age 29, again, when she moved to San Francisco, she started dating the mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. And
while he was mayor?
While he was mayor. And he had been the Speaker of the Assembly. He was maybe the most powerful machine politician in Democrat politics. Willie Brown and John Burton ran San Francisco. They had a political machine. And to win election in that town, their stamp of approval was necessary. And they really had not a complete control, but they were the most formidable bloc to get ahead in San Francisco. So they kind of approved who got to be on the Board of Supervisors, who, really ran for all these different positions and handed out patronage jobs in the city. And so the fastest way to ascend in politics there is to be tied to the coattails of Willie Brown. And so, she did that. And I don't know
more than tied to the coattails. She's sleeping with him.
She
right?
dated him.
Yeah.
That's how he describes it. He is still married at the time. And so he's 90 today, but he was married throughout this time that he was together with her for 2 years. Okay. And so they were a society couple. They went to all the operas, ballets, black tie events very openly. And, I've met Willie Brown several times. He just, it's not disputed that he gave her start in politics, and almost certainly encouraged her, hey, maybe you should register to vote. That might be a good start. Certainly how to move up in the ranks. And so one of the ways you do that is you get started with some lower level elective office. But even before that, a lot of our politicians in Congress and in the Senate and, former presidents have been lawyers. It's a great stepping stone to a political career. So getting a good record in the DA's office would have been a way to do that. So she, hustled her way into the district attorney's office and immediately began setting her sights on her power base. So she developed relationships in the African-American community, became friendly with Amos Brown, a notorious pastor and activist in the Bayview Hunters Point district, where is a large African-American population there. Yep. And, it's one of the rougher parts of town where the projects are. A lot of the drug and gang violence was centered in that area. And so she tried to make that her patch. And her theme was, supposedly hard on crime, but not in an unfair, disproportionate way on the African American community. So as you know, during that time, the 1990s, there was a lot of discussion in our country about harsh drug laws and disproportionate impact on African Americans. And so she kind of focused her efforts on that. And that was her assignment, was criminal organizations, basically gangs. Okay, so she was a gang and drug prosecutor, not a murder prosecutor, not a violent crime prosecutor. She never was that in her jobs before she became the district attorney. So she wanted those jobs, according to reporting at the time. She wanted to be moved up to the more serious responsibilities of violent crime and murder prosecutor, but she never was given that opportunity by Terrence Hallinan, who I think, reading between the lines, began to suspect that she was gunning for his job pretty early on. So after she was passed over a couple of times for the top lieutenant position in the district attorney's office, she quit. She quit and she went immediately sideways to the city attorney's office in San Francisco, which is also a prominent breeding ground for some excellent judges I've been in front of, have been city attorneys. Dennis Herrera was the city attorney at the time, and he held that position for a very long time. So she moved sideways after less than 2 years at the district attorney's office to the city attorney's office, where she put together a portfolio involving child welfare and, sort of juvenile offenders, that sort of a thing. Again, I would call it a pretty fluffy portfolio, but something that's designed to give her something to talk about if she runs for office. And so for 2 or 3 years, she spent her time there at the city attorney's office. Again, by the way, all on the, public employment. She's never had a job in the private sector.
Ever.
And so
Kamala Harris has been living on taxpayer money her entire
career. That's correct. She's never had a private sector job. Now, let me pause for a second. While she was doing some of these jobs, she actually was doing multiple jobs on paper, because Willie Brown, one of the positions that you get access to when you're the speaker, and then you pretty much continue to have a lot of access to over the years, is the ability to appoint people to patronage jobs. And so before he, kind of left the speaker's office, he was able to appoint her to one of 2 commissions. So she was on a taxpayer-funded commission called the Unemployment Appeals Board. And so you hear appeals of denials of unemployment benefits. That's a cushy part-time job, which pays almost $100,000 salary. You show up a couple of days a month. And then he also got her appointed to a second sort of part-time job, very part-time, a couple of days a month again, called like the Medical Assistance Commission, which was dealing with Medi-Cal contracts and appeals over that. And so over the years that she was taking a salary as first an Alameda County prosecutor and then a San Francisco County prosecutor, she earned an additional over $400,000 over a 5-year period from these low-show / no-show jobs. He also got her a BMW as a gift. And so
Willie Brown gave Kamala Harris a BMW?
He gave her a BMW, and he got her these extra hundreds of thousands of dollars of jobs. And to give you some perspective, the salary of a prosecutor around that time was about $100,000. So she basically got double or triple what her colleagues were getting. So imagine the morale in the office when your person sitting next to you is also dating the mayor and also is making hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you because...
And getting a free BMW.
So she was marked out as privileged in her 20s and 30s very early on. And that allowed her to leap over the career hurdles that those of us who work for a living in the private sector have to actually earn.
Yeah.
Right. And I think she's had to face these criticisms over time, and she's become very glib and good at deflecting